So today we're going to take a look at the compound interest review. Remember, our basic equations for the compound interest are going to be defined as follows. Well, for the test or the final written evaluation, you're going to need to be able to calculate the simple interest. And we basically had this. I is equal to PRT. And then we had all of the other derivatives based on this triangle. So you need to be able to figure out the equations for I, for P, R, and T using this basic triangle, okay? You also need to be able to calculate the compound interest using a table. So for example, I'll give you this specific table here that we're going to zoom in on. All right. So imagine I have something like this. And what you're going to do is you're literally going to create a table with 3 columns. You have your interest of 10%. And all we're going to do is we're going to calculate the interest of 10% on a starting amount of, say, $100, right? In order to calculate that, you got to have 3 columns. One that starts with the starting amount for the year. Then you have the interest. And then you have the total. The total at the end of the year. Now, the interest is the start is always the principal. The interest is equal to the principal times our percentage, right? So our percentage in this case is 10%. And then our total is going to be the amount, which is equal to the principal plus the interest. So let's go through all of these steps. So imagine I start with $100. With my $100, I'm going to take 100 times it by 10%. I get $10, right? So now at the end of the first year, you end up with a total of $110, right? So we're going to take that $110 and we're going to move that over to the beginning of the second year. Okay, so now what we're going to do is we're going to use what we knew and start our new year. So $110. And then we have to take this number and then times it by 110. So whatever the percentage is, which is 10%, give me 110. So in this case, I'm going to have $11. So now I have $11. So now I have to take $11 plus my $110 to get $121 for my total at the end of the year. Then I got to do that again where I go and take my $121 and I'm going to put it at the beginning of the first year. The third year, I mean. So now we're going to get 121 starting our year. And then we get 10% of that, which is going to be, well, $12.10. Because we just take 121 times by 10%, which is 0.1, which gives us 12.1. And then we add these two numbers in that row to get a total of $133.10. And this value here is what the amount is, the amount of money you have after 3 years. And we're done. Okay? Now, the next concept that you have to be able to do is figure out the compound interest using this basic calculation, which essentially just goes and gets us the final value in our table rather than doing all the work. It just gives us the final answer. Now, the last thing that we did was we took a moment and we've tried to find out what our compound interest formula was when we were looking for what we call the present value. Okay. Oh, by the way, I guess I should make note of this. This thing here, we call the future value sometimes because it's the amount that we have in the future. Okay. So the last thing that we studied in our unit was comparing the different interest rates or different compound frequencies. So make sure that you take a look at lesson 8.2C, and make sure you understand the summary for that unit, okay, for that lesson, okay? Now, let's go on to our next concepts. So we're going to go and take a look at simple interest, then we're going to look at compound interest, and then present value using compound interest. All right, so this problem is what we call a simple interest problem, right? When you know something is simple interest, the key word of simple interest is in the problem. So this one says Susie borrowed $3,500 from her father, right? And her father charged her 8% simple interest. So here is the basic equation that we need. We need I is equal to PRT, right? Based on that, we're going to put P, R, and T down the side and fill out what we need, right? And then we just plug that in to our equation to find out what our interest is. So it says after 3 years, how many does she owe? Remember that the T value has to be computed in years, right? And then it says here, we punch in our numbers and we get $840. The very next question asks us this: how much does she owe in total to her father? So basically, remember, the amount is always equal to the principal plus the interest, and you just add them together to get your final answer. All right, now let's move on to question number 2. John invests a certain amount of money, right? We do exactly the same thing as before, but this one says he takes $300, he invests $300, right? But then you get 6.5% simple interest. So we got to change that simple interest to 0.065. But then he invests it only for 8 months. Now, 8 months is not a complete year, but it is a fraction of a year. So we have to make sure that our T value is represented as a fraction. If I tell you it's 24 months, I have to go and convert it by dividing my 24 divided by 12 to get the total number of years. In this case, we've only got 8 months. So because we have 8 months, we can put in 8 over 12 and literally just take a moment and just plug that directly into our equation. We don't even have to change that into a fraction, into a decimal. We just plug it in. And then we end up with $13 for our interest. And remember, our total is called the amount, and we have to take the interest and the principal, add them together to get our total amount of money that we need, that we have in the bank account at the end. So let's go and take a look at the next problem set. We're going to be taking a look at questions that deal with compounding quarterly and the amount due at the end of a loan. All right, so this question talks about compound interest, okay? So this question basically has William, who borrows $9,400 at 10% compounded quarterly for 7 years, okay? And these are the key numbers in our problem. Now, the thing is, you know you have a compound interest problem, right? A compound interest problem because it says it's compounded. And there are two equations that we've got. A is equal to P, 1 plus I to the N, or we've got P is equal to A, 1 plus I to the negative N. All right, now we just have to figure out which one we're looking at. Now, when you look at the rest of the problem, it says, what is the total amount? When you hear the concept of a total amount due at the end of a loan, we are using this equation, the future value, okay, otherwise known as the compound interest. So when we use this problem, we got to go and write our A, P, I, and N, and then we're going to fill out what we know. We don't know the final amount, but we do know we have $9,400 to start. Then we have to say that it's 10%. So I'm going to put 10%, 0.10. 10% is 0.10. So as an aside, remember this. If you don't know how to calculate the percent, so you go 10% is just 10 divided by 100 on your calculator gives you 0.10. And you just punch that in. Okay, now the next thing that you got to remember is that it's compounded quarterly. Now, when you compound something quarterly, we must divide our percentage by 4, and we get a number. So our final number for our answer for 10 is going to be 0.025. Now, you could also leave that as a fraction when you punch it into your equation, but I kind of like to put it as a decimal. So the next thing that you're going to do is you have N. So N happens for 7 years, right? But because we're compounding quarterly, we must multiply the number of years by 4. So in this case, you're going to end up with 28 compounding periods. So now we can go and substitute into our equation, and we get the following. Remember, you always have to start with your equation, then substitute. And when we plug in our answer, we got 1 plus 0.025, which is just 1.025 raised to the 28. And you end up with this for your final answer. A is equal to $18,767.05. So now the next question is, how much money did William pay in interest? In order to find the interest, all you have to do is start with I is equal to whatever the amount was and subtract the principal. So you end up with this. And this is what we get for our final answer. $9,367.05. Okay, now remember, you always have to subtract the biggest number minus the smallest number to get your answer. All right, so now let's move on to our next concept. So now, this question still talks about compounding. It's like, I just look for the word compounding. Now, remember, you have two choices for compounding. A is equal to P, 1 plus I to the N, or P is equal to A, 1 plus I to the negative N. And we got to figure out which one we're looking at. So let's look at this problem. The moment I see compounding, I write those two equations up at the top, and I pick the appropriate one. This one says, Marla would like to purchase a new John Deere thing in 3 years. So at $11,000 in 3 years. That's it. The moment I say that I've got something that I want to purchase in 3 years, it tells me that I'm not going to be using this. I got to use the second equation because I want to know how much money does she need to invest now to earn that will earn 9% compounded monthly to get $11,000. So that is the equation that we're going to use. So I'm going to write down my APIN again, A, P, I, and then N. So now here's the thing. We need to have at the end of this $11,000. Okay. We don't know what we need to start with, but we do have the percentage, which is 0.09. And we are compounding that monthly, so we have to divide our rate by 12. Punching that into your calculator, you're going to get that. And you end up with 0.075 as our decimal. Now we got to figure out the number of compounding periods. We said it's going to be 3 years, right? But it's being compounded monthly. So I got to take our 3 years and multiply it by 12. So we end up with 36. So now we just take our equation, plug in the work, and we're good to go. Now, as usual, we always start by writing our equation, and then we plug in what we know. P is equal to 11,000 plus 1.0075. And we're going to raise that to negative 36. And this is what we get for our final answer. And we end up with $405.64 for the amount of money that we need to put in, right? So now if I want to figure out how much interest I have to have for this one, your interest is the amount minus the principal, just like before, and you get this. And we end up with this, $2,594.36 as our final answer. So now let's move on to our final example for our review, which is this problem here. You have two options for investing. Which one should you choose? And we're going to have to explain it. So for this problem, you're given two options for different investments, right? So we have to decide whether we're using, it says we have to decide whether we're using the present value or the future value. So the basic compound interest is for this because we want to find out how much we have at the end of each of these terms. So here we go. All right. So they've asked us, which one should we choose? 2,000 at 5%. Sorry, 2,000 for 5 years at 8% compounded quarterly, or 2,000 for 5 years at 6.9%. So here is the work that we get when we do option A and option B. And I expect you to lay your work out very similar to this on your testing. So when we compare option A to option B, it looks like option A makes more money over time, right? So the last thing that you need to be able to do is you need to be able to justify the reasons why you would choose option A over option B. And I would tell you this, based on the amount, the interest on option A makes more sense, makes more money, right? If you think about it, for option A, the interest is equal to $971.89. For option B, the interest is equal to $821.90, right? And based on that, this one earns more interest, so therefore I'm going to buy this. More interest, so invest in A. But you'd have to write a full sentence or paragraph for this, and that's it. Now, your example problems that I would like you to use for review on this are given here. Your practice problems are page 456, number 1 through 10. I'll post those online, and if you have any other unfinished questions from the past couple of lessons, go back and do those for practice, okay? And then you'll be ready for your evaluation.